In February 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the Nuclear Watchdog, released a shocking report. Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium had reached 274.8 kilograms. What made this revelation even more alarming was that just 3 months earlier, in November 2024, the stockpile had been at 182.3 kilograms. That means Iran had enriched an additional 92.5 kilograms of uranium to 60% in a matter of months, an extraordinary pace. Experts say that if this uranium is further enriched to 90%, weapons-grade level, it would be theoretically enough to build 6 nuclear bombs. The IAEA warned that Iran is now just a technical step away from acquiring weapons-grade uranium. This update deeply alarmed Iran's adversaries, particularly the United States and Israel. The pressure on Iran to halt its nuclear activities significantly increased. President Donald Trump, back in office, demanded a new nuclear deal with Iran and even threatened military action against Iran's nuclear sites. To back up that threat, the U.S. deployed 6 B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia, a strategic island in the Indian Ocean. In March 2025, President Trump sent a formal letter to Iran's supreme leader proposing a new nuclear deal. The letter was delivered via a UAE diplomat, first to Iran's foreign minister and then to the supreme leader himself. According to unofficial sources, Trump demanded that Iran completely roll back its nuclear program and halt all enrichment activities. He gave Iran a 2-month deadline, warning that failure to comply would result in military action. However, he also offered relief from sanctions if Iran agreed to direct talks and accepted the new deal. Additionally, the letter demanded that Iran end its support and funding for groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and other regional proxies. But Iran rejected the offer outright. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei called the deal a deception and dismissed it, questioning the point of negotiation with someone who doesn't honor agreements. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, echoed these sentiments. And that mistrust is rooted in reality. It was Trump who unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from the 2015 nuclear deal back in 2018. That 2015 agreement, known as the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, clearly stated that Iran would never pursue nuclear weapons under any circumstances. Despite the deep mistrust, Iran eventually agreed to negotiate a new deal through Oman's mediation, and the first round of talks was held in Muscat on April 12th. These talks were mostly indirect, with Oman playing the key role in relaying messages between both sides. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi facilitated communications between the Iranian delegation, led by Abbas Araghchi, and the U.S. team, headed by Steve Witkoff, Washington's special envoy to the Middle East. Both delegations stayed in separate rooms, with Omani intermediaries shuttling messages back and forth. Both sides described the first round of negotiations as constructive and respectful. The second round took place in Rome, Italy, and the third round was once again held in Oman. The fourth round, intended to involve technical-level discussions, was scheduled for May 3rd, but due to logistical reasons it was postponed, as announced by Oman's foreign minister. However, in the latest announcement, the United States and Iran are set to hold this round of nuclear talks on Sunday, May 10th in Oman. So now the big questions are, why is Donald Trump pushing for a new nuclear deal with Iran now? What were his objections to the previous JCPOA agreement? What would be different in this new deal? Is Iran even willing to accept all U.S. demands? And finally, what role is Israel playing in all of this? Before we dive into these questions, let's take a quick look at the history of Iran's nuclear program. Iran's nuclear journey began back in 1957 under the U.S.-backed Atoms for Peace initiative. In 1968, Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, a global agreement in which signatories commit to preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and using nuclear energy strictly for peaceful purposes. Compliance is monitored by international inspectors. Under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Iran launched an ambitious plan in the 1970s to build 23 nuclear power plants by 2000. At the time, the US and European nations fully supported Iran's nuclear ambitions because Iran was their close Middle Eastern ally. But things changed dramatically after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Western countries withdrew support, and due to political turmoil and the Iran-Iraq War, Iran's nuclear program was effectively stalled. Fast forward to 2002, when revelations emerged that Iran had undeclared nuclear facilities. These sites had not been reported to the IAEA, in clear violation of the NPT. This triggered global alarm. While Iran insisted its nuclear program was for peaceful purposes, the IAEA expressed concerns that some of Iran's activities had potential military dimensions. As a result, the US, European Union, and the UN Security Council imposed heavy sanctions targeting Iran's oil exports, overseas assets, and banking system. These sanctions devastated Iran's economy. Oil exports, vital to Iran's revenue, plummeted. The Iranian rial lost value, inflation soared, and Iran was virtually cut off from the global financial system. Still, Iran continued its uranium enrichment, heightening global fears. Then, in 2013, a turning point came when moderate leader Hassan Rouhani was elected president. He supported diplomatic engagement with the West. President Barack Obama also favored a peaceful resolution. Between 2013 and 2015, Iran and the P5+1. Between 2013 and 2015, European Union, Iran, and the P5+1, US, UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany engaged in intensive negotiations. The result? A landmark agreement signed on July 14, 2015, the JCPOA. Under this deal, Iran was allowed to enrich uranium only up to 3.67%, which is sufficient for peaceful use. Iran agreed to keep no more than 300 kilograms of enriched uranium until 2030. The IAEA was granted full access to monitor Iran's nuclear facilities. In return, Iran received relief from most international sanctions, could export oil again, regained access to the banking system, and had its frozen assets unfrozen. While the deal was hailed as a model for arms control, Israel and Saudi Arabia were strongly opposed. They argued that Iran was simply buying time and would resume its weapons program in the future. When Donald Trump took office in 2017, he labeled the JCPOA a bad deal, and in 2018, he withdrew the US unilaterally. He argued that the deal only delayed Iran's weapons development until 2030, at which point Iran could legally resume its nuclear ambitions. Trump and US allies like Israel wanted a permanent ban on enrichment and a deal that also addressed Iran's ballistic missile program. After the US pulled out, Iran responded by reducing IAEA access to its sites and increasing its uranium enrichment levels, as we've seen in recent reports. Ironically, at the time of the US withdrawal, Iran was still complying with all the JCPOA terms. Iran has repeatedly claimed it does not seek nuclear weapons, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has even declared that building such weapons is forbidden under Islamic law.
هم ساختنش غلطه، هم نگه داشتنش غلطه، چون به کار بردنش حرامه.
These developments had already raised alarm bells in the US, and especially in Israel. As a result, Washington began ramping up its rhetoric, warning Iran to either come to the table for a deal or prepare for potential consequences, including military action. Now, while negotiations for a possible deal are ongoing, the real question is, what do both sides actually want? From the US side, figures like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Michael Waltz, Trump's recently ousted national security advisor, are demanding that Iran either destroy its previously enriched uranium or ship it out of the country altogether. Beyond that, they're insisting Iran must completely dismantle its nuclear program, much like Libya did in the early 2000s, even if the enrichment is only for peaceful purposes. According to Rubio, if Iran needs enriched uranium for civilian use, it should import it from another country. Steve Witkoff, who heads the Iran talks on behalf of the US, initially supported a compromise allowing Iran to enrich uranium up to 3.67%. But now, with hardliners dominating Trump's foreign policy team, even Witkoff has shifted his stance and backs the idea of completely ending Iran's domestic enrichment capabilities. Some reports also suggest that the new deal might include restrictions on Iran's missile program, but details on that remain murky for now. On the other hand, it's clear that Iran wants a deal primarily to get sanctions lifted so it can stabilize its struggling economy. It's likely this economic pressure that's forced even Iran's supreme leader to consider a potential agreement, with Donald Trump no less. Trump's withdrawal from the previous deal had badly damaged trust, deeply offending Iranian leadership. But the sheer weight of economic collapse has pushed Tehran back to the table, even with the man who wrecked the last deal. However, Iran is not willing to entirely shut down its uranium enrichment program. What it is open to is negotiating limits on enrichment levels and stockpile size. Iran's leadership is adamant that it will not sign a Libya-style deal. They've seen what happened after Libya gave up its nuclear ambitions in 2003, and they don't want to suffer the same fate. Furthermore, Iran is refusing to destroy or transfer its already enriched uranium. Tehran insists on keeping it within its borders. And when it comes to its defense capabilities, specifically the ballistic missile program, Iran is not open to any restrictions or negotiations. Another critical Iranian demand is that the US must provide guarantees. If America unilaterally pulls out of the deal again in the future, there must be consequences for Washington too. So now you know where both sides stand. And frankly, neither appears ready to compromise on their core demands. Whether or not a deal actually materializes remains to be seen. One thing is certain, the upcoming rounds of negotiations will be extremely tough. And let's not forget, Israel remains strongly opposed to any concessions to Iran. It's actively lobbying against any softening of terms. In fact, Israel has a long history of trying to sabotage Iran's nuclear efforts. Back in 2010, it launched a cyber attack on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility, damaging its centrifuges. Israel is also widely believed to be behind the assassinations of several Iranian nuclear scientists, most notably Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was killed in a high-tech ambush in 2020. In recent years, there have been multiple attacks and mysterious explosions at Iranian nuclear sites, again, allegedly carried out by Israel. The Israeli government has made it crystal clear, if diplomacy fails, it won't hesitate to use military force to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Now we come to Donald Trump, the president widely associated with The Art of the Deal, a book he co-authored with Tony Schwartz. Trump has long emphasized his negotiation skills and often presented himself as a strong dealmaker. However, despite his efforts, he has yet to successfully broker a major agreement in key global conflicts, such as the Israel-Hamas war, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, or the US-China trade standoff. So, what do you think? Will America and Iran reach a new nuclear agreement, or will it be something similar to the old JCPOA deal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in more deep dives like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for future videos.